Last we had done this autocrine growth regulation pathway of cancer cells. Now moving on to that same concept, but a bit molecular explanation. This is a picture of a growth receptor. So whenever there is a growth receptor and a growth factor binding, there is a amount of signal transduction, and the signal reaches the nucleus where a particular gene based on this signaling pathway is activated. And once the gene is activated, corresponding protein is produced, and you can see a growth factor gene is usually activated. So this was a receptor for growth factor ligand. Signal moves down, and the gene which is activated is again a growth factor gene. So the growth factor as well as growth factor receptor genes. So the growth receptor, factor receptor, and the growth factor both are coming out, and this is an auto feedback loop. One of the very famous gene that is usually targeted in a lot of cancers is the RAS gene. You can see the location of RAS. You can see the location of RAS. So this is the growth factor receptor. RAS is usually present in, it's bound to GDP in its inactive form and GTP in its active form. And the main point of this pathway is that a variety of transcription factors are activated and cellular proliferation moves on. So as you can see, the signal usually received by RAS are signals from mitogenic factors. A lot of growth factors can behave as mitogenic factors. And I remember I had explained that mitogenic factors means those molecules which gradually moves the cell towards mitosis, or in other words, it helps in cellular proliferation. So if we look into the, this is another way constitutive signaling is done. So this was at the molecular level autocrine growth regulation. Now another property is the constitutive signaling. Coming to that, if I look into this particular picture, see how the RAS protein is existing in two forms. In one form, it is inactive, and in the other form, it is active. So what is making this RAS protein active and inactive? The molecular switch is the GDP molecule. So if the RAS binds with GDP, it's inactive. If it binds with GTP, it's active. So that is a molecular switch. In the cancer, bladder carcinoma, this molecular switch is something that is tweaked, or the RAS protein is mutated in such a manner that it cannot bind with the GDP, as a result of which it is constantly active as it remains bound with GTP. So you can see normal RAS, mutant RAS. Normal RAS is bound with GDP and it's inactive. For it being active, it has to be bound with a GTP molecule. A mutant RAS remains constantly bound with a GTP. So the molecular switch on RAS is lost. This exactly what happens in case of bladder carcinoma. There is a point mutation occurring in the RAS gene. I'll come to that later on when I'll be dealing with the genetic changes observed in cancer. And this is another form of constitutive signaling that can be seen. Constitutive signaling, what does the word constitutive means? Automatic. Signal transduction pathways are not automatic. They are usually induced on binding by the ligand to a receptor. So the receptor has to be bound to a ligand to make the signal pass on. But if mutations occur in such a manner that the receptor remains constantly bound, let's look into this. Let me explain this part in a bit detail. Receptors usually remain in the plasma membrane as monomers. You have studied that in apoptosis, where I had said that the DES receptors are found as monomers. When the ligand molecules start moving towards the DES receptor, they move through the membrane to form trimers. So unless and until, in case of DES receptors, they assume the trimeric configuration, they are not activated. So in a case of lot of signaling receptors also, unless and until they assume the dimeric configuration, they are not activated. So initially they are present as monomers. The moment the ligand comes and binds, they are found as dimers and their cytoplasmic paths meet each other and are phosphorylated. So once the cytoplasmic ends are phosphorylated, then only the signal percolates downstream. So if the cytoplasmic ends are phosphorylated, the signal passes on the downstream. And here we can see for the cytoplasmic domains to be activated, they need to come to each other. Now, if there's a mutation in the receptor gene such that the receptors are not found in monomers, but they are found in this configuration, then there is no need of any receptor, any ligand to activate this receptor. This receptor is constitutively activated. That is, it is automatically activated. It does not depend upon any controlling switch. So this is another, at the molecular level, a lot of cancer cells develop this property where they mutations in the receptor genes make them constitutive. They become independent of the ligand, or mutations in certain proteins make them independent of binding to their binding to those molecules which would have made them inactive. Now coming to the very accepted model of the two-hit model of cancer. This model was based on the discovery of retinoblastoma. So this was proposed by Knudsen in 1971. Here, Knudsen had seen that in case of sporadic retinoblastoma, the child is born with two wild-type alleles. In case of sporadic retinoblastoma, let me show you this picture. The child is born with two wild-type alleles, RB plus, RB plus. And the probability of both mutations occurring in the same cell is so low that very few tumors develop in this case. But in hereditary retinoblastoma, you can see that the child is already born with a mutation in the one of the RB gene. The other RB gene is normal. So only one mutation is needed for tumor formation. So the preponderance or the occurrence of hereditary retinoblastoma is much more than the preponderance of sporadic retinoblastoma. So he explained it that in case of hereditary retinoblastoma, since one allele was defective and one was normal, one mutation hit results in tumor. But in case of non-hereditary retinoblastoma, where you can see both the alleles are normal, first there is one mutation, so one hit makes one of the allele normal and the other abnormal, and still the person is not suffering from retinoblastoma, and then there is a second hit. So the other allele is also mutated and the cell becomes homozygous to RB mutation, resulting in tumors in the retinoblastoma. So this is a very famous model concept that was proposed for in both hereditary and non-hereditary retinoblastoma. So this question comes in case of second semester. So this is another way I have shown you. You can represent it in various ways in your answer papers. So mother normal allele, father normal allele, child with normal allele, one somatic mutation first hit, two somatic mutations second hit, then only cancer, mother already mutated, father normal, infant with one mutant normal, and then only one hit results in cancer. So for hereditary retinoblastoma, we need one somatic mutation, and in case of sporadic retinoblastoma, we need to have two somatic mutations to cause retinoblastoma. Now moving on to the next part of my class, genes and cancer. So now moving on to the last part of the cancer topic, genes and cancer. So the genes which actually results in a cancerous outgrowth can be broadly classified into three categories: proto-oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes, and genome maintenance genes. Now, if you look into proto-oncogenes, these are genes whose products normally stimulate cell proliferation. If I look into the tumor suppressor gene, these are genes whose products normally inhibit cell proliferation. Last category, the mutator genes or the genome maintenance genes, as mentioned here, the genome maintenance genes or the mutator genes. These are genes whose products ensure accurate replication and maintenance of the genome. Mind it, maintenance of the genome means if there is any kind of damage in the genome or in the DNA, be it a single-stranded or a double-stranded repair, then all the machineries, the enzymes involved in repairing them falls under this category. So coming to proto-oncogenes, the most best example, we have studied a number of proteins of this pathway are the anti-apoptotic protein and the proteins of the signal transduction pathway, which results in the proliferation or the development of transcription factors. Coming to tumor suppressor genes, these are apoptosis protein promoting proteins, inhibitors of the cell cycle progression, checkpoint pathway proteins that assess DNA chromosomal damage, or components of signal pathway that restrain cell proliferation. And genome maintenance are the DNA repair genes. Now let us see if a mutation occurs in these category of genes, what happens? See, this particular column actually describes what is the effect of a mutation in a proto-oncogene. Remember, a proto-oncogene helps in cell survival. So the best example of a proto-oncogene is cyclin D. Since you have studied cell cycle, imagine it to be cyclin D. So if we have a higher level of cyclin D, if you could remember, RB will be always phosphorylated and the cell passes through restriction point. Keeping this example in mind, when we think of the effect of mutation in a proto-oncogene, that means the gain of function mutation. There is a gain of function. Cyclin D is always activated. So there's a gain of function. Allows upregulated cell proliferation and survival. As I was saying, the example of the proto-oncogene cyclin D. So there is a gain of function, as a result of which it is constantly activated, it constantly phosphorylates RB and the cell constantly passes through the restriction checkpoint. We can bring in another very famous example of a proto-oncogene here, BCL2, but you have studied BCL2 protein, the pro-survival member of the BCL2 family. And if you remember, when BCL2 is hyperactivated, it ensures that BAX is not liberated from it. It ensures cellular survival. So in case of proto-oncogene, if there is a mutation, then the effect is that there is always a gain of function, just as we have seen in case of BCL2 or we have seen in case of cyclin D. Now let's come to tumor suppressor. The best example is RB itself. Normal RB is sequestered in the cytoplasm with E2F. That is, it is bound with E2F and it is not free. Since it is not free, it is bound with E2F. It prevents E2F from transcribing those genes, which helps in the passage of the cell from the G1 to the S phase. Now, if RB is mutated, that means RB will not be able to bind to its normal partner E2F. So that is a loss of function. Because of this loss of function, that RB is now incapable of binding to E2F. E2F is constantly free. So it is now no more regulated by RB and it will constantly synthesize the cyclins of the S phase. So when there is a mutation in the tumor suppressor gene, The resultant is always the loss of function, as a result of which cell cycle proliferation continues. And finally, the third category is genome maintenance gene. Genome maintenance gene, as I said, are parts of the repair of the DNA damage system. One of the very famous example is the BRCA1 gene. So this gene actually recognizes double-stranded breaks or single-stranded breaks. If a mutation occurs in this gene, then automatically it will fail to, so it's loss of function again. It will fail to recognize those breaks and accordingly repair those breaks. So again, the loss of function, mutation, see, allows mutations to accumulate. Since the repair is not done then and there, so the breaks persist, creating genomic instability, resulting in further cancerous condition. So this is a very good flow chart. In fact, this is a very good differentiation chart of the gain of function and loss of function. Now let's look into this column, genetic properties of mutant gene. Mutations are genetically dominant. So if there are 2 alleles of cyclin D, and if one allele is defective, these are basically haplosufficient, let's forget the haplosufficiency in this case. And if one allele is defective, it's seen that somehow hyperproduction of cyclin D is observed. Look at the genetic property of the TS gene. Mutations are genetically recessive, just like RB. P53 is another one. So since the loss of function is very damaging, hence one allele, if there is one allele also there, it still gives a first line defense by preventing the loss of function. And here also in case of BRCA1, the mutations are recessive. Now these 2 categories of genes being very important, very vital. So they are one allele is capable of normally driving the cell through a normal cellular life. So these genes are usually recessive in nature. Now let's see how the mutations arise in these cases. For proto-oncogenes, it may be point mutations, it may be chromosomal translocation. We'll be coming to the example one by one. I'm not giving you the example right now. And it might be amplification. We'll be dealing with the example one by one. For tumor suppressor genes, there may be deletion, point mutation, or methylation. Methylation, that means the promoter elements of this gene are methylated, so automatically the genes are silenced. Same for here, arising by deletion, point mutation, and methylation. So now coming to that same concept. So this is a normal cell. This is picture of Bruce and Alberts. This is a normal cell, and a single mutation event in a normal cell results in a proto-oncogene to be transferred or transformed into an oncogene. So one mutation event is actually causing such an activation that this gene is now producing huge amount of proteins. So gain of function. So if its normal function was to produce 50 numbers of cyclin D, it is now capable of producing 100 numbers of cyclin D. So this is gain of function. And as a result of this single mutational event, this was a proto-oncogene. It was not an oncogene. It was a proto-oncogene. As a result of the single mutational event, the gene is now known as oncogene. Now, what's the nomenclature difference between the 2 words? Proto-oncogene means this gene, if mutated, can cause cancer, but has not yet been mutated. What is the nomenclature of oncogene? This gene was a proto-oncogene, has been mutated to give rise to hyperexpression of its RNA, resulting in overproduction of its protein. So when we use the term proto-oncogene, mind it, the gene is yet still normal. When we use the term oncogene for the same gene, minded that the gene has now become mutated, resulting in cancerous outgrowth. Coming to, but now if we look into the tumor suppressor gene, you can say this is a normal cell. There is one mutational event. As a result of this one mutational event, no effect has occurred and the cell is still normal. So the loss of function has occurred in one of the alleles, but till now the cell is normal. The moment there is a second mutational event, you can see that both the genes are mutated and the gene has lost its normal functional status. It is now no more functioning. So both the genes have mutated, and as a result of which the tumor suppressor gene is now no more functional. The cell has now become cancerous. So overactivity or gain of function in one of the alleles of a proto-oncogene converts the cell into a cancerous one. Underactivity or mutation of both the alleles of a tumor suppressor gene actually converts a normal cell into a cancerous cell. So today we end our class here. From next day, we'll take up with the remaining part.